She has spent the last 7 years growing her outreach from a small ministry in the Hepatha Lutheran Church to a multifaceted mission in its own building, serving hundreds of people each day. Before that, she co-founded and led Repairs of the Breach for 22 years. MacCanon's work led her to be invited to join the Sisters of Christian Community as an avowed affiliate, and the School Sisters of Notre Dame as an associate. She was also recently named Inspiration of the Year by Positively Milwaukee. The insights MacCanon will share tonight reflect her deep faith and her love for and commitment to all people, regardless of race, status, or circumstance. Now tonight, we'll be using an interview format for the presentation. Our interviewer is Holly Morris. Holly is a longtime volunteer at the sanctuary and also serves on its board of directors and leads the new tutoring program there. We ask that you please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Those of you in the audience can raise your hand and we'll pass around the mic. Those of you joining on live stream can text your questions to the numbers shown on the screen. Again, thank you for coming tonight, and I am delighted to now hand over the program to MacCanon and Holly. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
I was too busy getting caught up with some of you. So wonderful to see so many familiar faces. And thank you for coming out at this holiday time. We are just absolutely honored to be here. And I'm surprised that Kathy didn't say that I was a longtime member of this church as well. And so we'll just start out by I know you're here to hear from MacCanon, so we're going to find out just a little bit about who you are. Can you tell us something?
Sure. I just want to also say what an honor it is. Is this on? Okay. What an honor it is to be here, and a joy to be here because of the history of the journey I've had with this congregation. And also to just acknowledge the wonderful preliminary work, a lot of work with a spiritual guidance with Catherine and Kathleen in preparation for this. I would really appreciate that. So there was a rumor going around that I had grown up in the ghetto, and I said, no, I was actually a rural homemaker in Iowa for 18 years before I came to Milwaukee. So that was definitely a rumor that I had grown up in the ghetto of Milwaukee. But it's because I am so immersed here, and back to the beginning, I'm the daughter of 3 generations of clergy, Protestant clergy from Iowa, raised in a home that was very religious and very genuinely spiritual. My parents were a pastoral team in the Evangelical United Brethren Church, which, as many of you know, merged with Methodists in the 1970s. My father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all in that tradition. And in that context, I was exposed to a lot of true faithfulness. One day I came home from church and Sunday school at the age of 4. And I asked my parents, what does this song mean? Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. what does that mean? Does that mean there are children who are a different color than me? Now, Iowa was all white at that time. In the last 40 years, there's been a huge influx of Hispanic people into Iowa. But at the time I grew up in the 50s mainly, as a young child, Iowa was all white because during the Civil War, Iowa stood very opposed to slavery. Iowa was rural. Iowa is rural, but Iowa opposed slavery, and there was not the presence of slaves. There were not the presence of African American people there. So it was all white. And so when I came home from church asking that question, my parents said, well, yes, that's what it means. There are children a different color than you. And I demanded to see them. I demanded to see them. I was 4 years old, and I wouldn't shut up until they showed me. And they took me to Des Moines, and they wanted me to see people who were a different color than me. So that wish was granted. But what I realized looking back on that experience was I was acutely aware that diversity was not in my life. I must have been aware from an early level, and it was kind of, seems to me, it was birthed into me. I was gifted with this awareness of people of other colors, that I was gifted with a love for African American people at a very early age. That was something that was in me and was starting to be expressed, and at that time no one knew the long journey that I would have ahead. But I went on, and I did reveal I had followed a different drummer. So when it came to choosing a college, instead of going to the same Iowa EUB college that all my family members had gone to, I chose to go to the one near Columbus, Ohio, Otterbein College. And I didn't know why, I just was drawn to it. I made that decision, and lo and behold, it was during the peak of the civil rights movement from 1963 to 65. And while I was there, people mentored me, and instead of the academics during that time I was there, I primarily was given a lot of education and exposure to the Black experience. I took part in civil rights work. I took part in urban, working in the inner city with helping people recreate the urban area. I went to large rallies, one with Jackie Robinson as the keynote. And so that was there for me. And who knew the long stretch? Who would have known I was being given a toolkit during those 2 years? And then I dropped out of college and married at the age of 20 a farmer that I had fallen in love with a few years before. And so when I was on the farm, I was a rural homemaker. I have 3 grown adult children I'm very proud of, and 5 grandchildren in Iowa. And I had, during those years on the farm, of course, a lot of love of family life. And at the same time, what was becoming very clear to me was that I was a very radical person. I was a very radical person. I was discovering that year by year, and discovering that what my good person, ex-husband now, needed was a traditional woman. So it was a marriage that was not meant to last, and I came to Milwaukee with a little bit of a literary career going on that had begun in Iowa. I had become listed as with the Iowa Arts Council as a professional literary artist, was working in schools and giving lots of workshops and so forth. And then as I searched for where I could go, if I left that context because I did not have enough income and I needed to find a place where I could make a living wage. I chose a future in the arts, and I chose Milwaukee. And I became listed with the Wisconsin Arts Board, coming here with a dream of having the ultimate lifestyle of being an artist and an intellectual and hobnobbing with the arts community. That was what I believed was going to happen when I came here in 1986 as a newly divorced woman. Well, God had a plan B, and it was clear there was a plan B, and all of a sudden there was, in about 1990, 1991, it was clear almost everywhere I went there was something to do with homelessness or people in poverty. It was like I had a magnet. A priest took me under his wing, and he introduced me to all the agencies serving the homeless in Milwaukee, got me a scholarship to the Urban Ministries, St. Benedict Urban Ministries course, and when I took that course, I knew it was just almost like a voice from heaven that this was, and it was something I felt at the cellular level, that this would be my path. I heard and I spoke a vow at the end of that course: if I can ever do anything to help homeless people, I will do this, Lord. Now be careful what you pray for, because that was a vow, and that God heard that vow, and so that was 1992, and that's when all of these doors opened, and many of the doors that opened were Catholic. I could not ignore that. It was very obvious to me, and so I went to prayer, and I sweat bullets, and I wrote a letter to my parents in Iowa. Now you can imagine how Protestant my family is, with 3 generations of clergy, Evangelical United Brethren. And I wrote a letter and said to my parents, here I am breaking your heart again, breaking your hearts again. I need you to understand some decisions I'm making. I need to help you know what's going on, and here it is, and I'm choosing to convert to become a Catholic, and I'm just asking for your understanding. And for 2 weeks, I barely slept, but then the letter came back, their letter, giving me their complete blessing. And then even on the day I was brought into the Catholic Church, my mother drove, my father was in a wheelchair. They drove and they were there on that Easter Sunday, present to my becoming a Catholic. So that was quite, an adjustment for everyone. But from that time on, everything just, it was clearly a path. It was clearly, I knew it was a calling. And so I'm privileged to be in something that is a calling. We are not always clear on those things, but I'm blessed to have that calling. So the other things that happened from that time on, she referenced in the introduction, but sometimes people want to know, huh? How can you be a farm woman from Iowa and be spending 30 years doing what you're doing? So now you got the inside story on that, all right?
Well, was privileged to have a calling. You're privileged to hear that story, because I think she almost never tells it. Why don't you share something with them about the population that you serve, and maybe some of what are the factors that have led to homelessness here in Milwaukee?
Sure. And that we serve, because Holly, I call her a pillar of this organization. She's very humble, but she definitely is really a very formidable presence in what we're trying to do, which some people consider impossible, what we're doing. And so we serve people who are homeless and people who are considered at risk of homelessness. Now, it's important for you to know that people try to put people into two categories, two boxes. People try to think this is the box or the category for homeless people, and this is the box or the category for people in poverty. It ain't so. The people who live in poverty are in and out of homelessness. They may be homeless for a while and then they're back with housing again. They're homeless for a while. There's all these dynamics, especially landlord-tenant dynamics. And so if you've ever read the book Evicted, you'll know that's about Milwaukee, and it really accurately portrays that reality that I'm talking about. So for us, with the many ways people are homeless, the many ways people are living in cars, in abandoned buildings, in the bushes, on the streets. People are living in shelters, but not a whole lot of homeless people choose to live in shelters because they don't like being where there's rules, or they don't like the craziness of the collective there. So we have the people living in tents. We have all of these ways people are homeless, but the one I'm lifting up especially that you might not know about are the doubled up homeless. As doubled up homelessness is when there are people living under a roof, crowded together. Maybe they're family, maybe they're just friends, but they're under a roof, and maybe someone's paying rent, and maybe no one's paying rent, but they're crowded, and the sanitary conditions, the health conditions, the mental health conditions, the crowdedness are just not good. That neighborhood where we are situated right now has the highest number of doubled up homeless people in Milwaukee. I confirmed that with the Milwaukee Public School System when we arrived there, and they said yes, according to the homeless department of Milwaukee Public Schools, they have the highest number of doubled up homeless in the greater Milwaukee area. So the whole picture is one of people in poverty and in various contexts or settings of homelessness. To me, in my 30 years, all one population, people not two disjointed populations. How did they become homeless? Every situation is individual. There are some trends, maybe a certain number have gone through domestic violence and been displaced. Maybe a certain number have gone through landlord-tenant issues and been displaced. There's just so many dynamics, so many causes that we conclude there are as many causes of homelessness as there are homeless people, because every situation is different.
And I know that you've talked a lot about the 53206 and why you chose to work in that area, but maybe you could talk about the food desert that's there and some of the other factors that went into your decision to work there.
So how do I explain this? It happened. It happened to us. It's like that path that I was talking about. It was that happening, and then my accepting this is what's happening, this is where God put us. That's how it did not originate with me. When we decided to create a new organization in 2014, I talked to Sherry Tussler of the Hunger Task Force, and she said, well, you might consider going into that area because they're so resource scarce. So based on her insight, I got a meeting with two leaders in that neighborhood, the Amani neighborhood, of the 53206 zip code, Sister Patricia Rogers of the Dominican Center, and Pastor Mary Martha Canas of the Hepatha Lutheran Church, and talked to them, and they said, oh, we hope you establish here. We hope you establish here. So that was a vote of confidence, and we started giving out clothing in a parking lot, food and clothing. Bethesda Baptist Church gave us permission in the summer to bring clothing and food and give it out in their parking lot there at 20th and Locust. And then the owner of the building at 2461 West Center Street, which is a 5-story warehouse, called me. He knew me because he was a co-owner of Sloan's Furniture, around the corner from my former organization, Repairers of the Breach. He knew me, from that. He said, Sister MacCanon, I'm going to show you your next sanctuary. That's what he said. He said, come get a tour. 2461 West Center Street in the 53206 zip code. So I went to show up for the tour. This is a huge monster of a building. Some of you know that. It's a 5-story warehouse designed by Thomas and Alexander Eschweiler in 1927. It had no heat, no water, no gas connection. It had been built as a furnace factory. And it was such a monster. So I showed up for the tour just to be nice. He said, I want you to see your next sanctuary. And I said, yeah, right. I mean, I didn't say that to him, but I was skeptical. But when he gave me the tour, something happened to me on the cellular level. I could feel the energy of hundreds of people, positive energy in that empty building. I could feel it in a way like clay speaks to a potter. It was so real to me. I couldn't deny it. It didn't make any sense in the world. We had no financial resources. We had hardly any human resources, but I felt it, and so I said, I need a reality check here. I'm good at getting reality checks. So I called 4 trusted people close to me, including the architect Craig Corson, whom I knew pretty well. I said, will you tour this building and give me your take on it, please? So they took the tour, and all 4 of them said, this is. They all 4 said that. So we began to negotiate, and then that's a whole story, but we were able, by a miracle, to purchase that building at the end of 2016, and then it's just been a series of miracles as we've developed that building. But that was our beginning to be established in that area. And then we began our ministries out the back door. We began our ministries at Hepatha Lutheran Church, 9 blocks away. But that's how it happened. It wasn't me saying, finger to the wind, I think we're going to establish ourselves in the Father. It was something that opened for us, okay?
And I think everyone would be interested in hearing a little bit about your vision and the mission and what makes that unique.
Yes, thank you. Did you want to add to that at all with the building? Or?
Not yet.
Okay. I just want you to be open to that. I know you have insights. And so with what we've grown from the beginning of my 30 years doing this work, grew out of my friendship with someone who's no longer here, Tony Lee, because I was brought into Repairers of the Breach to help with the newspaper. That's what it was in 1992, people had heard through the grapevine that I had been a newspaper reporter for a while in Iowa, and I was for a couple of years a newspaper reporter. So Repairs of the Breach had been a newspaper for the homeless, and there were like every season there were 6,000 copies published, and it was a resource for homeless people. So they brought me in, and within 3 months I was president of the board of directors. And then it just kept unfolding. But Tony Lee was on that board of directors. He was a Vietnam veteran who had had this amazing transformative experience as he came back from Vietnam on heroin, angry at the world, in a terrible rage against society, living on the streets, carrying a stick and making people run away from him wherever he went. This intellectual, this spiritual revolutionary, who had been, before Vietnam, the first African-American member of the fire department of Rockford, Illinois, and had done some work with the Black Panthers and so forth. But on the streets, one day, a person came along who was homeless and in a worse situation than Tony Lee, and this person showed Tony compassion. And he couldn't believe it, that this person who had a worse situation than him would show compassion to him, and it changed his life forever. He went into treatment, he got his family back, he became a contributing member of society, and he became part of the board of directors of Repairs of the Breach. And he was saying, as I became board president, let's not just be a newspaper anymore. Let's open a place where homeless people can reach out to each other. And that's what we did. We opened a daytime space where the main thing that was happening was homeless people reaching out to each other. And that whole thing about people of struggle being in community and having leadership, that grew into my own ideas too. So we together co-founded the first daytime homeless sanctuary in Wisconsin, actually, in Milwaukee, and it grew from there. So that model became a model not just of homeless people, but of the people who were privileged people wanting to be part of our community. That model has stayed with us all of these years, a solidarity community made of people who are formerly homeless, people of struggle, united with suburban people, people of privilege, in a oneness, not with the suburban people or people of privilege coming in to fix people, but for them to be part of a transformational solidarity community as equals, like we did this morning, our Tuesday doorway ministry. We had 35 staff and volunteers there, some of them coming as far from Sun Prairie, from Waukesha, from New Berlin, from Grafton, and the people of the neighborhood with them, giving out all this food and all these essentials to 120 people who stood in line, some of them for more than an hour and a half, waiting their turn for their number to be called. We had over 120 people today to serve, and our team was 35 strong, none of them feeling like they were better than anyone else or less than anyone else. That team of economically diverse, racially diverse people doing the work of compassion together. And we did it. We had a wonderful day. Meanwhile, more than 20 cars drove up to share donations of food and coats and all kinds of provisions, replenish our supplies. We had people coming from Beaver Dam, those cars coming from as far away as Beaver Dam and from all over the greater Milwaukee area, more than 20 coming in a caravan, waiting their turn to unload their trunks. So that gives you an image of our solidarity community.
Thank you. That really is how it is.
You've seen it.
Yeah, I hope you'll have the chance to see it. She called me today, so good, to tell me about this one Tuesday, but it's pretty much every Tuesday that's like this. Maybe a little bit more with Thanksgiving upon us. Could you just tell us a little bit about the station of the people of African descent? Say something about that.
Sure. So with the Milwaukee experience, I couldn't help but notice when my journey began with Repairers of the Breach, where we were serving from 14th and Lee close to the downtown. We were serving people who were in various settings of homelessness, including a lot of street people, but people living at the rescue mission nearby, living at guest house nearby, and so forth. But it was 95% African American. And I thought about that as the days went on. Now, I had chosen, when I took my urban ministries class and made my vow to God, I began to live in the hood, so to speak, not so much right in the middle of it, but more on the parameters of it, but in what is considered the hood. I made that decision by choice. I choose to live there. And so I had, seen that reality of Milwaukee, that we have the segregated areas. And I noticed that it was 95% African American coming through the doors of Repairers of the Breach. And I looked closer, and then I noticed that, like Seattle, if you would go there, it's primarily majority Caucasian. There's other places in the country that are majority Caucasian homeless people or in poverty. And nationally, the majority is not African American nationally of the homeless population. But I noticed in Milwaukee, and then I went to visit someone in jail to pray with them, and I noticed that almost everyone in the waiting room was African American. I went out to the House of Correction for the county to visit someone and pray with them, and I noticed that everyone in the waiting room there was African American. And I also have been in the courthouse various times, and nearly everyone in the courthouse going to court is African American. And I thought about it so much, and I thought, this is because in the greater Milwaukee area, there are long time unresolved black and white issues, very unresolved. And then to be in the most hyper-segregated neighborhood of Wisconsin, where we are now, so hyper-segregated, is 97% African American. So the people that I'm describing standing in line, and let's talk about that. That is the most food scarce area in Wisconsin. There is no retail presence there. I love going to Sendik's down the street. The contrast between Sendik's and the stores, there's like 4 in that neighborhood, 4 mom and pop stores that are houses made over into stores, and the people who run them have the prices 4 times higher than usual. A bag of sugar is $4. A can of tuna is $2.50, but most of what is sold there is not food. Potato chips, soda, malt liquor, beer, cigarettes, and blunts. If you look at the food section, there's very little food in those stores. So if you live in poverty and you do not have a car and you don't know anyone that has a car, which is many people, many people, and that's why we give out suitcases on wheels to the people coming to our doorway ministry. We give out strollers to them and children's wagons because we give them big bags, and they're on foot. They're not driving up. That's not a curbside charity. But the stores in that neighborhood, there's just not much food there, no produce, So when we began to come in the door, when we began to serve our people, when we purchased the building and got permission to do that backdoor ministry, while the construction had begun, we saw the people come in the door. We had brought 2 SUVs filled with fresh produce from Feeding America on the tables there. And people came in the door, and they couldn't believe this was free. There was no fight involved. You didn't have to show an ID or prove where you lived. It was just free, and it was being given in kindness by these amazing volunteers who are people of faith. And you could see the altered demeanor of the people, their their faces, their body language. Many of the people were skin and bones. I am not exaggerating when we came in there. And when we'd give some of the people a bag lunch, they would say, "Thank you, I'm going to have food today. I am not making this up. I am not fabricating this." And so just that, the fresh produce. Now we're talking about, the most extreme food desert, and that's why you see in our priorities, not just help with housing, help with literacy, help with all these various inequities, but primarily food. We're talking about the most lead-contaminated neighborhood in Wisconsin, where good food, reverses the toxicity of lead. We're talking about the most food scarce, but the most resource scarce, where we are, where God put us in that big building, the most resource scarce area, not just in Wisconsin, but one of 8 such communities in the whole United States, where it was ranked, Milwaukee was ranked, the worst conditions for raising African American children. This is the zip code that has the highest percentile of Black males who are incarcerated in this state, but also in the whole country. 53206 has the highest percentile of Black males who are incarcerated in the entire country, where we are. So we have all of these inequities. This census district where we are located, which is number 88, of 212 census districts in Wisconsin, has the most chronic health problems and the most general health problems, as well as what I'm saying, the food scarcity, the lead contamination, and so forth. So here we are with this incredibly impactful model and the growing number of people stepping forward to say, how can I help? But what is true is this is symptomatic of racial discrimination. This is serious. When that neighborhood had 5 or more industries there a few decades ago, it was thriving. And then those industries all went overseas, but nothing was done remedially for the economy of that neighborhood. So it went into a tailspin. It went into a tailspin, and now it has the most violence, the highest incarceration rate, but what we have there, as we have come to know the people we're serving, which is what we do, we're not doing this institutionally, we're doing this personally, is there are these people who are, among them are people who are trying so hard to lead Christian lives or Muslim lives, trying to have stability, trying very hard to be law-abiding. There are those individuals right there, just like in the neighborhood where I live. There are drug houses by where I live. There are shots fired every week sometime or other. You know, I call 911 and report, you know, but there are all these people there too who are trying to lead lives following God's ways. And so we cannot generalize about these are all bad people. We have the public mind, the public mentality that criminalizes the people in the central city. We have the public mentality that blames everyone for their situation. But if you just think about it, it wouldn't be hard to see if you crowd all of these people together who are already in struggles, sometimes for more generations than the one. They're already in struggles, and you crowd them all together, and you pull out all the resources. What are you going to get? You're going to have the symptoms of extreme poverty, which they are predictable. They are predictable. So when we see all this tragedy and chaos and conflict and violence, what would you expect if you crowd all these people together with hardly any resources? I did some research in the four-county area. The four-county area, 5,000 nonprofit organizations. And wouldn't you expect there would be a cluster of charities in the most impoverished area doing things like addressing basic human needs like food, for example? When we arrived there, I did my research. There were like a few churches doing some things, but only 7 nonprofits that were venturing into dealing with basic human needs in that area, out of 5,000 nonprofits. So we come in there, and a lot of people said, well, there are groups who want to go there, but there's too much crime, there's too much violence, there's just too much. We wouldn't be able to get volunteers to go there, we wouldn't get staff to go there. People didn't want to go there. It's just, to me, to see that, it becomes a question about race, even that. You know, that's a hyper-segregation of charity. So when we talk about our model that has everyone as family, the guests are part of the sanctuary family, and they feel that. We communicate that. The volunteers from the suburbs and the neighborhood feel like family. The staff, we have 17 staff, part-time, including me, that's a joke, you know, part-time. But of that 17, 8 of them are from the neighborhood. We feel like family. The donors sometimes express they feel connected to what we're doing. And a whole lot of that is the secret of why we never have violence. In my 30 years of leading these efforts, we have not had one violent situation. It isn't about me, it's about our model, because we have the very people we serve helping to lead it. And it's about the Holy Spirit, of course. I see Bonnie Barr here. She's a very active volunteer with our Doorway Ministry and our other ministries. She's from this congregation, and she is not afraid when she comes there and helps us out. As today, when we took care of about 120 people. Very intense. But we don't have violence because there's this spirit, there's this atmosphere. And with that, then, people are transformed. It is transformative.
I think you might have already said this, but just, I mean, I am listening, but just make sure that, talk a little bit about how your faith has influenced this ministry and this mission and this vision of oneness. The Holy Spirit, you said that, but is there more?
I've never doubted God. It surprises me as I learn more about the Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta, that she acknowledges in her writings that she went for about 8 years with doubt. That doesn't make me lose respect for her. I have tremendous awe for her, and she's a role model to many of us. But I've been blessed never to have doubted God. And I know my upbringing was with truly faith-filled people. In my early years, I was surrounded by people of genuine faith who lived it, lived the scriptures, lived the Spirit. You know, that blessed me. But in the living out of that, you know, going through what all that I've journeyed through in an urban setting and in the university of life, as we call it, my faith has never been tested, even though I've gone through some difficulties. Becoming a Catholic was just another opportunity to affirm what was already there. And I don't in any way, I just integrate into my faith journey the Protestant upbringing into the Catholic context that I'm in right now. It doesn't, there's no tension between that at all.
And how, with all this responsibility that you take on every day, how do you stay centered?
I do an hour and a half every morning of spiritual practices. I've done that for more than 40 years. And then I do an evening, about 45 minutes every evening of spiritual practices, including prayer. Prayer is really central in my life. I believe in collective prayer. I believe that's very powerful. And in the mornings, I combine various forms of prayer and scripture study, but there's intercessory prayer. I do that. I do specific petitions of specific individuals or specific causes for prayer or concerns. I do meditation. During that hour and a half, I practice transcendental meditation, which is not religious, but helps me with my mind and my body and my balance. But a whole lot of it is prayer. And I think I'd like to mention, I have traveled overseas twice, and both of those trips were gifts of my former employer a long time ago. One of them was a gift to Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland, where my former employer knew I would not be joyful about a trip to Honolulu. So he paid my way for 1 week in 1999 to a 1-week spiritual retreat of prayer at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the death camps, with 120 people from 12 countries. The majority were Jewish, The next group, largest, was Buddhist. Then there were Christians, and there were 7 Muslims. So in an interfaith context, we gathered for prayer every day, spent 5 hours on the grounds, made a huge circle, and prayed the 4 different religions. And we also went into the gas chamber and prayed together, and we went into the dormitories of barracks and prayed together. That was for 1 week in 1999. And I had this experience that has stayed with me. When we went down into the ruins of some gas chambers there, 120 strong, 4 religions, you could feel the evil like crawling on your flesh. Seriously. But as we began to pray, you could feel the evil leaving that space. We talked about it later. We could feel it leave. And as we prayed, this whole level of peace established in place of that evil. And it made very clear to me the power not just of Christian prayer, but of interfaith prayer, collective interfaith prayer. It made me a believer in the power of that. And that has stayed with me. That's why our organization is interfaith. Mm-hmm. We have a community of Taiwanese Buddhists that are with us from time to time. We have Muslims, we have people from we have Sikhs, we have Jewish people. So that is something that has grown out of that. So part of that, my faith experience, is to be open to that. But also the time in the morning, I open myself to the Spirit and to direction. I ask for direction, and I also just open myself to the Spirit and just receive what equips me for every day, which is pretty unpredictable every day, you know. So that's a long answer, but maybe people will find something there. I don't know. Maybe people will find something.
Well, I think it speaks to the theme of tonight, the oneness theme, and the family theme that you so often talk about, and the way you bring everybody in that way as a family. I'm wondering if you could tell us, maybe briefly, because I think we're running out of time, but and we do want to have some questions from you. But I think if you could just share, how does this, your vision, our vision, and our center, how does it impact the people?
We have the suburban people just experiencing tremendous change from coming in, having been programmed with all these recordings, you know, especially the public mentality, just all of those recordings, and seeing them through different eyes, different glasses, after they've stood in a circle with us and experienced the side-by-side oneness that we not only proclaim, but we bring into ourselves, you know, expressions from the suburban people that they are just totally reinventing their sense of who is family, who is brother, who is sister. And often from our Central City people who stand in that circle, mm-hmm. They're saying, before this happened, they always thought suburban people or privileged people looked down on them. They always had this sense of being judged, and they say that has changed. They feel family. They don't feel threatened by judgmentalism or being treated as inferior.
Well, I how much time do we have, Kathy? I just want to be sure to leave time. 5 minutes for their questions? Oh, okay. All right. I guess maybe I'll just take 2 minutes to tell my story of being involved. And I can really attest to the transformation. And the transformation, it's just really interesting. You know, we can give our resources, and we can give of our time and our talent and all the things we're taught. But when you become a part of a community of oneness like this, it's a transformation that I never could have really imagined. And there's just such great joy in being part of this vision and this ministry. And it has changed me in really good ways, hopefully. And so I just, you know, there's so many of you that do wonderful, wonderful work. And a lot of you are actually involved in this particular ministry. But I can't say enough about when poverty has a name, it has a face, and it has a story, that is transformational.
And that has a ripple effect. Holly Morse, in your own way, you influence so many other people, and your journey, you know, has a ripple effect.
Thank you. So I don't know why, we'll ask one last question. Why does our society not adopt this philosophy that's so different? Why does society in general have this different view of marginalized? And can you answer
People
that?
are at different levels of awareness. I'd like to just really bring up the concept of the we awakening. And I became excited about this when I watched on public television some indigenous people, young people, 19, 21 years old, from Canada, who were the prophetic voices. And the prophetic voices of the young right now are saying, for the sustainability of the human race, for the sustainability of this planet, none of these differences matter anymore. And people are at different levels of being able to get that or listen to it or hear about it. You know, they're saying none of these differences matter anymore. That's the prophetic voices of the young who will lead the human race into the next centuries beyond us. You know, so you pay attention, and people are at different levels of being receptive to that. But it's truth. It's truth.
My son and his wife, we went to the center, and I introduced him to MacCanon. And I just distinctly remember, he's 42, so I don't know if that's the generation you're talking about. But he said, yes, we very much believe in the human family. I thought that was really interesting. You know, again, that oneness.
Thank you.
I think it's your turn.
I'd like to open it up for questions from those of you. And we have a couple people that have mics, and so if you're interested in asking a question. And I'm going to lead us off with one. MacCanon, when we had been talking a little earlier, you had mentioned a concept, I believe it was called Ubuntu.
Oh, yes.
And I just would,
Yeah.
if you could talk about how
Sure.
that kind of informs
Thank
your
you.
view of
I
the world.
shouldn't let people leave this gathering without
No,
knowing.
I wanted to hear
Yeah, this
about
is
that.
worth staying for, even if you're in a hurry.
So that's our secret sauce, like, you know, McDonald's 2 all beef patties and all that. The special sauce is something that you all need to know about. It's Ubuntu, U-B-U-N-T-U. And that was a concept that Bishop Desmond Tutu introduced to the world several decades ago, and it's a South African concept that there's two different definitions I love. One is, I can't be who I am unless you can be who you are. I can't be who I am unless you can be who you are. The other definition is Ubuntu is the essence of the individual that only can come into play in community. Both of those definitions resonate with our work, and it's a message for everyone, everywhere, to dance to, because it has to do with what Dr. King eloquently lifted up as so real, so true, that we are all part of a garment of mutuality. So if you can come to terms with that, with any individual you meet, no matter who they are, what race, what ethnicity, Ubuntu, I cannot be who I am unless you can be who you are. That's that interdependence that is the world, the human race.
And we forgot to mention that part of our mission is these 3 words. Be. It is a place where you can come and be. You can come and be you. And then you can belong and be a part of a community. And then you can become that transformation, something different.
We've got a question back here.
Knowing some people that are homeless and need resources, where could I go to help find the appropriate places for certain people with maybe different problems? And is there a resource center that I could point them to other than just saying call 211?
Yeah. Want me to take that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So we have opened a crisis center. It's been running in that building I described. That's the part that's done. Now we're starting phase 2, but we have a crisis center that is open Mondays and Wednesdays. And in that crisis center, we have nurses, we have showers, we have lots of different kinds of help, helping people with their situations. That's our welcome center. In the whole picture in Milwaukee, the safety net is in tremendous disrepair. There's a whole lot more homelessness. There's not enough affordable housing. There's a lot of evictions going on. It's a terrible thing. But what I know from my research right now, best idea is to call Housing First, because they're trying to put people from homelessness right into housing and none of the in-betweens. So I recommend that.
How do you call housing?
Housing First. You can Google that.
Oh,
And it's
there
part
is
of the county. It's county run. And
County run,
they're
Housing
doing
First.
more than a lot of other places, agencies are doing.
Okay.
Are there any other questions?
I just have a comment. When I visited, I was so impressed with the garden that you had and the hydroponic work that you have planned. Could you comment on that?
Thank you. I remember, yeah, I remember you coming. Yeah. And anyone can ask for a tour. We love to give tours. So when we recognized food as so important there, and saw as people started having the fresh produce we bring, you could see them become healthier, you know? Then we learned about the lead contamination, so we prioritized food. And so we have, across the street, we have 20 garden beds. They are 20 foot by 4 foot, and some of the members of this congregation work those gardens along with neighborhood residents. That food we've shared for 4 growing seasons, and the city sold us that property for $43. We think the $3 was for paperwork, you know. But the aquaponics system, MSOE people have partnered with us, and we are strident in our progress in developing on our 3rd floor year-round indoor gardens, and with that, the fish as a nutrient presence that will go into our future meal program. We have the kitchen and dining room planned on 1st floor. That's very soon, that construction, you'll see that being developed. And on 3rd floor, the aquaponics system will provide food, very nutritious food for that meal program. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I think that's a way, you know, one of the things we didn't discuss, and I don't know if you're interested in, but just how you can be involved. There's just so many different ways. And that's one, if you enjoy outdoor work and gardening. There are people that are in leadership here in the church and that.
Not to mention the tutoring.
They didn't ask.
Go ahead.
Sister, she goes by Sister now. Some of you have known her as long as I have. And she, that's interesting because the African community called her sister long before she became a sister. So it's interesting. But she wants me to just talk about the literacy program. I say she tapped me and said, can you do a literacy program? I was a recently retired teacher. And I don't even think I hesitated, did I? No. But anyway, I say it was like having a baby. It took about 6 months. We partnered with the Literacy Services of Wisconsin. And we started this process last spring, and we launched it 2 weeks ago. And so if anyone is interested in being a tutor with our new literacy program, we would love to have you. We would especially love to have you if you are a math tutor. And you should come see John Weirsham. He's surrounded by all the math students, but I'm sure he would love some support.
Yes, good.
Are there programs for the homeless to move them towards whether they need mental health or whether they can move them towards a trade? Are there people like counselors or guidance that can guide them whether they need mental health, like perhaps they have schizophrenia or maybe they have just depression?
Yes.
Or I don't know, whatever mental health problems someone could have, or they're fine, and like how do you move them forward? What's the percentage of forwardness of like how hard is it to get people that are homeless to be sufficient? Does that happen?
That's a very good core question, and we, in our growth since the pandemic, you know, as we've re-energized some of our previous programs and then are adding to them, with the mental health, we're trying to bring in some professionals to our 4 outreach events. We have 4 outreach events per week. Right now, one of our nurses, and the nurses take turns being in our crisis center, has a strong background in mental health, so she's doing some work there. But with employment, we have right now, we bring Employ Milwaukee in every Friday at our outreach event there, and they're very good at bringing people into those conversations. But in the long view, our 4th floor, we have a vision of our 4th floor being all about jobs and employment, but very clearly in touch with the reality that what people often have not had is the soft skills of employment. Many times people in that neighboring area have gotten a lot of day work and been paid cash, but they have never had like a job. And they've never had like a marketable skill. So we envision having our own in-house industry and paying our people wages while they learn these soft skills of employment and a skill which we believe will be woodworking to market themselves outside of our walls there. But we have the rapport, we have the credibility, the trust, hard-earned, but there, that people will try our programs because that's a one-stop shop and they feel like family. If we give them a bus ticket and say, go to 16th and National, it's not going to happen. But we have this opportunity, and God gave us this amazing facility to develop with our amazing vision and model.
Like, are there bigger companies that help fund this right now? Like, what's your support system?
We chose, under my leadership, we don't take out a great big loan, $3 million, and have it all done, and then have enormous debt. So we've just had it be, as the money comes in, we do more with the building. We do more with the operation. We do more with the infrastructure. And as we demonstrated our good stewardship, and we demonstrated what we can do and the impact of what we're doing, more and more people believe in us. Our donor pool has expanded, and foundations have begun to be interested in us. We did just happily, joyfully, we were chosen as one of 6 nonprofits in Wisconsin by the Gannett Foundation, which is, they own USA Today and the Journal Sentinel and lots of newspapers. We were chosen as one of 6 nonprofits in Wisconsin for an award recently. The Gannett
Positively
Foundation.
Milwaukee. No.
Oh,
Well, the inspirational person of the year.
Positively Milwaukee?
Yeah, from
why don't you
Positively
answer that
Milwaukee.
instead of me?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was TMJ. That was a TMJ Positively Milwaukee.
Carol Meakin.
Yeah, Carol Meakin. If you see those sometimes, yeah. I know early on, maybe back in 2014, I remember somebody saying to me, I don't know if I really want to get involved in Sister's ministry. I kind of want to wait and see what she does. That was 2014. So I hope that person is listening. So here we are. And I like to think of that. Please drive by 2461 Center Street. I mean, come in and visit too. But there's a website. Is that website information?
We'll show
on
that.
something? Yeah.
Mish, could you put
can
that,
go.
maybe up the slides up that show the volunteer opportunities as
Oh, she has that.
It's a
here's
very
the website.
large building, with a large dream to fulfill, but I like to think of it as sort of a beacon of light in that area. And it's exciting, and I mean, really, everything that's going on.
So another question that came in was, you mentioned that there were other nonprofits that really, because they were just afraid to come into 53206, didn't work there. How do you overcome that fear factor and just the reticence that other nonprofits seem to have?
Go ahead.
Oh, I probably should talk about it because I have the fear factor. And, I mean, it's a little bit scary. You feel like your life is at risk. I do it every week, but I would say it is the Holy Spirit and it is Sister MacCanon. Once you kind of start in this volunteer work, that fear subsides a lot, and you feel like you're just part of something greater.
There it is. Yeah, there's something larger than ourselves. I think Bonnie would probably agree with what Holly said, right? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, have any of the other non-for-profit organizations started working? I mean, is there any way, or have they started working together? I read in the paper all this money that is going to nonprofits, and I sometimes wonder, where is all that money going?
Thank you for
And
that.
so I'm just wondering, are you noticing that they're working with you more, or do you seek to work with them more, or how that all works?
Thank you so much for that question. I'll take this one. And so once we established, we noticed a few other nonprofits have sprung up nearby. So we were happy that if that emboldens some people to do that. In the nonprofit sector, there are some waves of collaboration and spirit of collaboration, some waves of spirit of cooperation, and unfortunately there's sometimes in that a dynamic of competition, which really years ago seriously disappointed me. I just thought, especially if you're working with poor, destitute, and homeless people, there should never be that, where we're competing for pieces of the pie. Those words were even spoken to me by another nonprofit director. We have more to do in terms of creating those conversations. We have some, but mostly with churches. We have the involvement of over 115 churches so far, interfaith, of course. So we do a lot with churches. We are trying to dance with some other nonprofits, but it's not as cultivable as it should be. Thank you for that question.
I can't say enough about Literacy Services of Wisconsin and partnering with us too and providing us with the training and providing us with the materials and giving their time and opening their doors. And there's an organization that is centered in our community.
I was just going to answer one of the question that came to me about the fear factor too. Is my personal experience as I've gone down and worked more and more in the inner city. Just if you read the papers, you're expecting that you're dodging bullets, every moment that you go down there. And you get down there, you go, there's no bullets. And the people are nice, they're funny, we have a good time together. It's just, you just have to be willing to try and then realize that this is not at all what it's been portrayed to be.
Well, Sister did this at Repairs the Breach. I remember I was with her there, and I said, well, how do you create this bubble? And she said, I just ask the drug dealers to move a few blocks away. Right? That's what you said. She talks to the people. Please, we're trying to have a peaceful place here. And you created it again.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Okay. So first I just want to thank MacCanon and Holly for such a thoughtful and inspirational presentation. There was just so much there, I think, for us to kind of chew on over the holidays. We think about how to have a better society and be better people. If you're interested in volunteering at the Homeless Sanctuary, the next slide, can you put up the next slide, Misha? It just shows some of the volunteer opportunities. Is there another slide? Oh, there it is. There's a number of different ways there's a ton of different ways you can get involved with the Homeless Sanctuary, no matter what skill set you have. So I think just really contact them and see, where you can fit in. I'd also say that MacCanon has provided some other information that some of you, I think, already did pick up, but if you didn't, feel free to pick it up on your way out. I also want to let you know about a couple of other ways that you can learn about and advocate for housing equity. One is to sign a letter by a group called the Redress Roundtable, which is made up of many of the social justice organizations in this city. The letter will be sent to the Milwaukee County on December 1st, requesting the creation of a committee on equitable housing. The letter and a signature sheet are available on the table in the narthex. And for those of you who are on live stream, you can sign the letter at our church if you want to stop by, or at the Milwaukee Public Library on North and Kramer on November 28th from 1 to 4, or the Milwaukee Public Library on 9th and Wisconsin on December 1st from 10:30 till 12:30 p.m. It does have to be signed in person. But it's amazing that we don't have any kind of committee right now talking about equitable housing given the crisis that we have in housing in Milwaukee at this point. The Redress Roundtable will also present 2 classes at Nicolay High School this winter on housing segregation and implicit bias. And flyers for those classes are also available on the table outside. And finally, as you leave, feel free to grab a cookie and also a copy of our Advent brochure called Believe if you're interested in having something inspirational to read this Advent season. And with that, I want to thank you again for coming tonight and wish you all a very good night. Thank you.